Hello and welcome to the DMPL Podcast. I'm Aaron Gernes, your host, and we have a special guest with us today on the podcast, Toni Simmons. She's going to be part of the Community Table Local Food and Storytelling Festival coming up on Saturday, October 14th at the Franklin Avenue Library. It's the second year we've had the Community Table event. We're so excited to be hosting it again, and we're so excited to have Toni here with us on the podcast. How are you doing today, Toni?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, so you're going to be coming to Des Moines as part of Community Table, and we're going to get into kind of what storytelling means to you and what people can expect when they come to a storytelling festival. Because again, this is the second time that we're going to be having it, so there might be a lot of newcomers to this arena of entertainment. But first, I wanted to talk to you about just kind of get people comfortable and familiar with who you are and how you became a storyteller. Because you actually spent some time as a librarian, even here in Des Moines for a little bit. And you spent some time as doing drama, I believe, as well, in theater. So can you tell us a little bit about how everything led you to where you are today?
Well, I became a storyteller, I would like to say, when I was a young person, when I was a child. When I was in elementary school, I just loved stories. My school librarian was a great mentor. We had a library club, and she would read stories to us. She'd have us act out stories. We do plays for the school. And I decided then that I wanted to become a children's librarian so that I could share stories like she did. Well, I did become a librarian and worked in my hometown of Miami for the Miami-Dade County Public Library. And I've worked in several libraries, including the Des Moines Public Library, Minneapolis Public Library, and in Cedar Hill, Texas. Well, needless to say, my work with the library really developed my storytelling. People who came to the programs would ask, oh, could you come to my school and do programs? And we did, as part of our job in the library, would do school programs. And then parents would ask, could you come to a birthday party? Or could you come to a festival? And needless to say, years went by and I became a professional storyteller. I still always kept my involvement with the public library in some form or not, but I never left that work. And now I travel all around. I've traveled internationally, telling stories. I've done programs not only in libraries and schools, but in churches, museums. And of course, I never left my theater background, which is what my undergraduate degree is in. And I combined all of this, my theater background, my experience as a librarian, and my storytelling skills all into my programs. So I use a lot of audience participation, a lot of creative drama, helping the audience join in with the story, having them become a part, helping them act out some of the stories. That's the type of work that I do now.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about what storytelling is and how it differs from reading a story from a book or acting out a story on a stage in a play or a one-person show?
And because I've done all three of those, there is a difference. For instance, when I teach storytelling also to young people and adults, I tell them one difference: if you're in the theater, you have to memorize your lines. You've got to know the cues from the actors before you and after and all of that. But storytelling is not memorizing each word of the story. It's memorizing the sequence or order of events. And you put the story in your own words. You tell it in your own words. You tell it in your own body or mouth, as we like to say, because I would tell a story different from you. You may know Little Red Riding Hood, and so do I, but I may do it differently. As I said, I like to use audience participation. Now, when you're reading a story, as what we did in the public library for our preschool and toddler story times, and most parents do, and reading aloud is very important. There's an art to that also. But you have a book in your hand and you're reading from the book. Storytelling is oral. You don't have the book. You have read the story. You know the story, and you are retelling the story in your words.
It sounds like that's part of we talk about storytelling and oral traditions as kind of a long-standing thing through many cultures throughout time. So storytelling is really a living, breathing thing in a lot of ways, and it kind of changes in the telling and changes in the teller.
Exactly, exactly. And I like to say, in order to know a people, you have to know their stories. And their stories around the world that sound alike. Because when we were trading many years ago, goods and services all across the world, we were also trading our stories.
So at a storytelling festival, what do people see and hear and, watch, I guess?
Well, some festivals have workshops where they're teaching you how to do this. They're teaching you how to take a story that maybe you learned as a child or remember as a child. It could be a true story, and how to bring that story to fruition, to life, as we would say. But and most festivals have a variety of storytellers. So you see different styles. Some people tell personal stories. Some people tell folk tales from different cultures. Some tell true stories. Some tell scary. I just went to a festival in Tennessee, which was called Haunting in the Hills. So it was all about ghost and scary stories. So I would say you expect the art of storytelling. You expect to not only be entertained, but to come away inspired, maybe to tell your own, but to also be educated because you've learned something from listening to those stories, from listening to the different storytellers.
And what type of stories do you tell, Toni?
I used to tell people that I don't tell tall tales, as they say, because some of our festivals even have liars contests where they give out big trophies for the tallest tale. Um, I specialize in folk tales, African American folk tales, but I tell multicultural stories from all over the world. I do have some historical stories that I share also, stories that my grandparents used to tell and stories about my grandparents.
How did you become good at this? I mean, it must have taken a lot of practice, a lot of time. You are now headlining, a lot of these festivals all over the world. You're all over the country. You're like you said, you're in Tennessee. You're coming to Iowa. You've traveled internationally. Obviously, there's a demand to see you, and we're very excited to see you on the 14th. But how did you become so good at this then?
Well, I've been doing it for a long time, almost 40 years, I would say. And not to share my age, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you are with doing it. And that's something else I say to my students: practice, practice, practice. The more you tell stories, the better you'll be at it. Years and years ago, I went to a school in Texas and was telling stories with a kindergarten class. And one of the little girls came up to me afterwards and she said, "Oh, you're very good. If you keep practicing, you'll be even better with this." And all I could do was laugh because listening to a kindergarten say true words. Yeah.
And you did become better at, I guess. So at the Franklin Avenue Library on October 14th, you're going to be taking part in a few different workshops. Can you tell us a little bit about what people will be hearing from you that day?
Well, I know we will do an olio where you'll hear me. And
yeah, can you explain that a little bit more? Yeah, there are a couple different olios, I think. And, I did look at the schedule, and that's I feel like a storytelling specific word. So what does that mean for people?
That just means you'll get a taste of, and which is fitting because the festival is a community table, you'll get a taste of each of the storytellers in that one session. We'll each tell about 15 to 20 minutes, so you'll get to hear a story or two from each of the storytellers. And then I know I will have another session, which is about 45 minutes to an hour, where I'll share a variety of stories. So you'll get to hear something that's fun and something that's historical and something, a folk tale or historical tale, or just a variety of things. And it's suited for all audiences, for children, family audiences, and adults. Everyone is welcome, and the stories are appropriate for all ages.
You talked a little bit about audience participation. I think that, that could make some people a little nervous. They don't want to have their hands picked on, but I think you'd like, that just means what to you? How do you get the audience to participate in these things?
Well, yes, let's explain that, because some people may say, "Oh, I'm staying away." She may call on me to come up.
This is not an exam.
I like to involve the whole audience. So you may join in with me in a song or a chant, or you may do a movement. For instance, if I'm telling a story about a snake, I may ask you to move in your seats as if you're a snake. Now, sometimes I may call for volunteers if the story is a story that I need specific acting out or help with, to come up front. But most of the audience will stay in their seats and join in, either by singing along or chanting along or responding to me, which is different again from theater, because theater, there's that fourth wall and you don't necessarily interact with the audience. You're not asking them, "Oh, have you ever seen a bear before?" And that's audience participation, where they go, no. "Have you ever had a time when you got lost?" Those kinds of things the audience would respond to. But in theater, you would never address necessarily the audience and wait for them to respond back to you.
Yeah. Does the audience play important roles in some of these tales?
Oh, yes. Yes, very, at least in my stories, they do. Yes. Sometimes they become one of the main characters in the story. For instance, if I may be telling a story about a giant, I may have them do the giant's voice, from the audience.
So, and I'm just curious about that. Does that mean, like, you talked about how storytelling is living and breathing? Can the story even be kind of like shaped around the specific audience reaction that you get sometimes?
Yes. Now, the storyteller is always, quote, hopefully in control.
Sure,
of the story.
You don't want to give up the microphone.
Yes. So there's an art to that also, to making sure you steer and guide your audience participation so that it doesn't get out of hand. I like to say it's carefully orchestrated.
Yeah, but it means people coming to this festival on Saturday, they're not just going to be bystanders, as you said. There's participation. They're going to be part of. Yes. They're going to be part of this, and it could be a really cool opportunity for them to like kind of be involved in something without being on the spot.
Correct.
That's awesome. You talked a little bit about coaching and instructing youth storytellers. I'm really curious about those experiences. Can you tell us like why you wanted to get involved with that and not just do your own work, and what it's like to watch young storytellers blossom?
Well, I do believe in giving back, and I've always loved to work with children. And at one of my jobs in the library, I decided that I would start a youth storytelling club, and it just has blossomed. That was like in 2009. I thought it would be for, a few weeks, and I would work with grades 3rd through maybe 6th. Well, some of my students liked it so much, they stayed through high school. And so we've continued that program. Even though I don't work in the library anymore, I still coach these students. And I have had 5 of them chosen to perform at the National Youth Storytelling Showcase in Salt Lake City, Utah, at the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival. So I'm really proud of that. I believe that that's a legacy for me, to have all of these students who have come up and been exposed to storytelling. I'm not trying to develop them necessarily into becoming professional storytellers. I want them to have confidence. I want them to be able to speak in front of an audience, whether it be for an interview or on a job, and whatever career they they undertake, that they would have that the skills that you develop from storytelling and stay with them for life.
How has your storytelling evolved over the years? I mean, what kind of new stories have you told? How have you shaped your stories as you've become more experienced in storytelling?
Well, I believe I could say when I first started, because I was a children's librarian and that was my target audience, that most of my stories were geared for even young children, preschool. In fact, let's back up to my working in Des Moines.
Yeah.
I was the Rosie librarian when I lived in Des Moines and worked for the public library. And the Rosie librarian was the outreach librarian. So my job was to go to daycare centers every day and take books and do stories. And so that was the audience that I basically spent most of my early years working with. So my early years of storytelling were geared for them. And I have evolved over the years and developed more stories for upper grades, even middle school and high school and college programs. And of course, senior programs and just family programs in general. So I would say that's how I would describe the development of what I do now. Now nice. I gear my programs to all ages.
Just wanted to side on that. Would you believe it if I told you that the Rosie team now consists of 5 librarians?
Well, when I was the Rosie librarian, we would have a librarian from each of the branches also go along with it.
Yeah.
So that could be the same process. And we had a song, the Rosie librarian said, oh, and so I can't wait to come back to Des Moines to see and meet some of the new Rosie librarians and to see the Rosie van. I also was a branch manager at the Mid-City Library.
Yeah.
And Northside, which was in the Fair Park shopping center at that time. Yeah.
It's just moved across the street now. And of course, now we have the Forest Avenue Library that's as well, which is kind of near where the old Mid-City used to be. But yeah,
okay.
And Rosie is actually a full-on mascot now too. Look at the joy on your face learning that. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
We have a full-on mascot. We have stuffed Rosies for the time the big Rosie can't make it out. So yeah, it's really, there's like a fleet of 4 cars now. It's crazy. So it's been a lot of fun.
I'm so glad to know that it's still going on. I talk about that program to other libraries because when I left Des Moines, I started working in Minneapolis Public Library, and then also in Texas, I was director of the Cedar Hill Library. So I would use the Rosie example for, okay, this is one of the best outreach programs there is.
Kids love Rosie these days. I know I'm kind of like telling you about something now, but the reaction that kids have to seeing Rosie when she steps out into a classroom, there's screams, there's giggles, kids run up to her on the street. It's wonderful. So the legacy that you were part of is continuing to this day in Des Moines.
Oh, great. Great. Do they still have the song? What is it? Rosie, Rosie, here from the library.
I do not know. You might have to talk to our librarians about that one and get that one going again. I'm not sure about that. So, well, again, the Community Table Storytelling Festival takes place on Saturday, October 15th. You can go to dmpl.org. You can find the full schedule there. It's running pretty much all day at the Franklin Avenue Library, events for all ages. Toni's going to be there. She's going to be doing some great work on telling stories, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So, Toni, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today, and we can't wait to see you on the 14th.
On the 14th, on Saturday. Please come out. I can't wait to see everyone.